Hello, my name is May Troy, and for my original contribution for my Master's in Educational Literacy through American College of Education, I have chosen to dive into vocabulary knowledge for literacy development. Vocabulary is one of the pillars in the 5 pillars of reading. Reading is the product of word recognition and language comprehension. This can be seen in the model of the simple view of reading. Both word recognition and language comprehension must be strong for proficient readers to exist. This means that if one skill, word recognition or language comprehension, is lacking, the overall product will not be sufficient and students will not have strong reading comprehension. In this model, you can see that each of those bullet points are a strand on the saffron reading rope. The majority of students with reading difficulties struggle in both domains of the simple view of reading. That meaning they aren't comprehending because both pieces are missing. However, if a student is having a hard time with language comprehension but has really strong word recognition, they're still not going to comprehend the full meaning of a text. Okay, what is literacy and why does it matter when we're talking about vocabulary? When I was starting my master's, I truly thought that literacy was reading and writing. But to be truly literate, an individual must possess the ability to, yes, read and write, but also speak and listen and think in ways that facilitate effective communications and can interact with today's society. This is important to note that this changes throughout time. Currently, students are interacting a lot through technology, and that's a big part of literacy. To support literacy through vocabulary, we need to build a stronger reading comprehension. A robust vocabulary aims students in their understanding and helps them connect to new ideas and new concepts through their background knowledge. Also, enhancing word recognition and decoding is a very helpful tool to build literacy. Students who understand the morphemic awareness and understand how words are broken apart in multisyllabic ways are able to be more fluent and comprehend their texts better. We also need to help students improve their writing and expression. Having a strong vocabulary empowers students to articulate their thoughts clearly and creatively through their writing. This influences, as an author, both their meaning and tone. For example, using the word happy is an okay word, but if they want to help their tone or meaning of their writing a little bit more, using a word like joyful or thrilled or excited helps portray that idea better. Building background knowledge is also a helpful way when we're talking about vocabulary when building literacy. So learning new words introduces new concepts, therefore enhancing students' content knowledge and their overall background understanding. This makes building more information easier as their schema grows. Strengthening oral language and listening skills is also essential. Strong oral language development is crucial for literacy, particularly among young learners. To understand a student's vocabulary, it's important to understand that there's receptive vocabulary and there's expressive vocabulary. Receptive vocabulary is a student's ability to take in words that they might recognize when reading or listening. So this would be kind of one of those times that you're like, I've heard of that, but I don't really know what it means. While expressive is when students can take their mental dictionary, how they understand a word, and express it through speaking and writing. During early stages of reading, students have typically heard more words than they're able to read, which makes sense. As students are learning to read, they hear more rather than seeing it. They often know these words before they're able to read. In fact, students usually recognize the words orally rather than in writing. Utilizing expressive words takes more of a mental workload. And so therefore, when students are able to speak and write with using those terms accurately, they have a greater meaning of those words and truly, quote unquote, own that term. The average kindergartner enters school with a vocabulary of 4,000 words. Typically, the student will acquire an additional 800 to 1,000 words each school year until the 6th grade. As a teacher, I would love to explore all 1,000 of these words in depth with these students. However, that's simply not a possibility. And realistically, I can teach about 10 words per week, totaling about 360 words per school year. The remaining words that were not taught in depth and explicitly are often learned informally, so this could be through conversation or just a simple interaction with a text. These informally learned words often mean that students might not be as familiar with their meaning, so they haven't made those deeper connections and are less likely to incorporate them into their expressive language. It's crucial to highlight that the 4,000 words that this kindergartner walked into is an average. This means that many students start kindergarten without a strong vocabulary if they're below that 4,000 word mark. This already puts a student quite a bit behind compared to their peers. If they don't have that average 4,000 words, they lack exposure, which makes it more challenging for them to develop other reading skills like phonics. Typically, the amount of words that students enter kindergarten with reflects a family's socioeconomic background. Students who come from a higher income family will often have a kindergartner who enters above that 4,000 word mark, while students who come from families that have a lower socioeconomic background are more likely to be below that 4,000 word mark. So it's important to encourage families of all socioeconomics to be engaging with their students in conversation, to be reading with them at a very young age. Kids are like sponges and absorb the verbal world and environment around them. Every teacher understands how hectic a school day can be. Making the task of teaching vocabulary terms seems overwhelming amidst all the other responsibilities that we have as educators. But it's crucial to recognize that vocabulary instruction needs to be explicitly taught. Many of these lessons can also be delivered in under 5 minutes, oftentimes as mini lessons, and be incorporated as games, which makes the learning more fun and enjoyable for both the student and the teacher. Developing vocabulary is a vital skill because if a student reads a passage without grasping its meaning, the effort is useless. The ultimate goal is not to teach to read, but to read for students to be able to read to learn. This would enhance their literacy skills while building a vast background knowledge. When explicitly teaching a term, it's important to carefully select the words that you introduce. Vocabulary terms should primarily consist of Tier 2 words, which are applicable across various content areas. Pre-teaching the selected vocabulary term allows students to connect the new word to their prior knowledge. Ensuring that the presentation of this new word is also done in a student-friendly manner. I like to make analogies or use synonyms or antonyms when introducing the word. It makes it more student-friendly, and it helps the student to build a mental framework around that new term. While there isn't a specific number of interactions a student needs to be required for their brain to transfer the information of this new term from short-term memory to long-term memory, the more engaging and meaningful interactions that a student can work with a term makes it the likelihood of that long-term memory and that lexicon where that brain's holding the word dictionary be stronger and students be able to use that term in their expressive language. For emerging readers, multisyllabic words can often feel overwhelming. However, once we have taught students the explicit skills to understand how to break a word into its morpheme, so those smallest units of meaning, they're able to do this without the task feeling as daunting, and it's much easier to comprehend. I truly appreciate doing more phonic awareness instruction because it can be tailored to accommodate students' variety of needs in both their reading capabilities and kind of that hands-on activities. This can be done through a word analysis where we can say students are dissecting a word into its morphemes and components and then blending them back together to understand the entire meaning of the word. I like using different magnetic blocks for this, and then it kind of creates a puzzle. We can also do word sorts where students are engaged with how to break apart words. So in that prefixes, suffixes, and then the root words, and they can build different words from those sorts. Or you have the words as one whole piece and they find out what's similar and different within those sorts. These activities can be conducted as whole class, or they can be in a one-on-one setting, or depending on what your class specific objective is, they can also be done in small group settings or for intervention. We previously discussed the significance of multiple exposures, but it's essential to emphasize that the brain thrives on repetition. To provide students with repeated exposure to vocabulary, teachers can revisit vocabulary words in context or across context areas. So they're utilizing that same word in various subjects. So social studies, science, art, wherever that word can come up, it's best to use it across those areas and maybe point out how they're different. Pointing it out in different texts, nonfiction, fiction, and discuss over several days or weeks how that word might come up. And then we need to create opportunities for students to hear the word, see the word, say the word, write the word, and maybe even act out or have students drawing a picture of what that word means. The goal is to create meaning. Teaching vocabulary goes beyond drilling memorized definitions. It's about helping students own the word so they can make a meaningful connection and interact with society in that word or with that vocabulary term. We would want to promote students to incorporate the targeted vocabulary in both their speaking and their writing. So having times that they might be required to use that term in both discussions or in a writing activity. Additionally, I think it's important to share the list of vocabulary words with families as homework. It's important to communicate to our families, though, that the goal is not to be quizzing their students on definitions for this term, but rather to suggest that they are using the vocabulary term in their everyday organic conversations with their students. I truly resonate with this quote by James Britton. I think that it connects so well to the meaning of developing literacy that the primary aim is for communication and want to express their ideas. To be able to communicate and express ideas, we must be able to teach students how to use the words that we're providing for them. So this can be done by modeling how to use academic language. So, for example, if the word was observe, I could say, "Oh, Henry," to the student sitting on the carpet, "I observe how well you're sitting down." We can also provide students with sentence frames or discussion starters to be able to help them do that pair share. So we have to teach kids how to talk to each other with using those terms. Teachers can also choose text that is rich in vocabulary for their reading activities to enhance student learning. So being intentional about the passages or books that we provide to our students and read aloud to them, that we know the selected vocabulary before reading, that we have been aware to pre-teach and really spend those times to make those deeper connections. And then incorporating breaks during those read aloud sessions to clarify unknown words as they've hopefully already been taught, but again, connecting those words to students' prior knowledge and illustrate how those words were used within the sentence structure. When doing read alouds also, it's important to ask open-ended questions to invite students to respond with the best of capability with the acquired new vocabulary words. In this last slide, it is my references for the information that I've gathered. Thank you so much for spending your time to learn about vocabulary.